So we have 3 MOUs that we're reasonably sure, none of them has been approved by the other board. I understand that the Londonderry is expected to be approved by the Londonderry School Board this evening. As you are aware, in negotiations with Pinkerton Academy for a tuition agreement, there was at least one issue that we couldn't come to an agreement on. And it had to do with the long-term nature of the contract and things that they proposed would happen in year 6 that were not acceptable to us for a number of reasons. There's been no change in their position. The Board of Directors for Pinkerton meets tomorrow evening. And I do want to preface what I say. I'm not finding fault with anybody. I'm just going to tell you the facts. And if I make a statement that, like, I'm blaming somebody, I'm not intending to do that. So anyway, the Board of Directors meets tomorrow evening. And to be honest with you, I expected a response to our discomfort with parts of that, what they were proposing, long before today. Nor did I anticipate that I would have to wait until Thursday for the Board of Directors to meet, knowing that I'm supposed to make a presentation on Monday. And I will tell you this, and this is unrehearsed. Marge, what is my Wednesday and Thursday of this week in my calendar?
Working on Monday's presentation.
Yeah, I will not do anything in a hurry-up fashion. It's just not the way I operate. So I did. I blocked out 2 days. This is going to be done, and it's going to be done right. So having the Board of Directors meet on Thursday night, and then I'm not knowing until Friday morning what was going on, is a matter of some concern. Because what do I prepare for if I don't know what I'm preparing for? So there is an outstanding issue that the board is aware of that is a deal breaker for me, and I think it's a deal breaker for the board. Today I learned that Pinkerton has an issue with number 4 on the MOUs. Now, we haven't shared those MOUs with Pinkerton. We wouldn't do that if we were negotiating with someone. But from what I understand, their attorney or someone else actually downloaded the MOU off the Londonderry website. And their attorney has a problem with number 4. Let me give you the background between behind number 4. When we started negotiating these MOUs, I took a stand with the 3 school districts that this was not competitive, that our kids were not going to be selected to go to the satellite schools, that they had a right to choose the satellite schools. And you realize up until now that some of these satellites have required kids to do essays, do an application. There have been visits here to talk to teachers and so forth. I find that a little bit too much. in terms of an MOU. So during negotiations for the MOU, it was important for me to get limited choice, that our kids would choose a satellite, not be selected by a satellite. As with all negotiations, there's a little give and a little take. And in the 3 MOUs, you'll see that under number 4, basically the 3 school districts agree to that, but we're concerned about, and I'm going to word this awkwardly, and I don't mean to. We're concerned that we would dump kids on them that we didn't want, that weren't going to go anywhere else. So it was actually, I think, Londonderry's attorney, and Londonderry and Bowlby had the same attorney, that suggested, and I'm reading from number 4 on the Londonderry, about a third of the way down. It says, further, Londonderry reserves, you with me? Further, Londonderry reserves the limited right to deny enrollment for any student who is subject to current suspension or expulsion, or who has a significant, and I'm stressing those 2 words, limited right and significant, history of drug abuse, material misconduct, and/or violence. And stop there. That language is unacceptable to Pinkerton.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are you saying it's unacceptable to Pinkerton that we have it in this agreement, or do we have it in?
No. It's unacceptable to Pinkerton that we have it in our MOUs.
Phil, so what you're saying is they are saying they don't want to be adverse selected against, is basically what you're saying.
I'm sorry, Phil?
You're saying that Pinkerton saw it and they're thinking it's an adverse selection deal because
Yes.
the other schools have the ability to do
Yes.
that.
In fact, what Pinkerton is saying is what the other school said initially. How do we know that you're not going to send all your, my words, best kids to the satellite schools and then leave everyone else for us?
We're hearing this for the first time, but I actually find it kind of odd as a parent going through this process before. Last year, our son actually applied to Pinkerton, and they were the most strict with regards to deadlines, qualifications. They wanted to see grades. They wanted to see a lot. Versus Londonderry, we had the information, but nobody ever really, made it that strict. So I find it kind of odd that they're the ones complaining about this MOU. I really do.
And John, I'm staying away from value judgments. I'm hearing this all for the first time at, I think it was 10 o'clock this morning. But it is what it is. Through our attorneys, Pinkerton has expressed concern about number 4, and number 4 is in all of our agreements. It's called a reservation of rights clause. It's not unusual. Our attorney has contacted the other attorneys to see if the other attorneys would be receptive to changing that language in some way. And as you probably know, you just can't pick up a phone and call an attorney. Sometimes they're hard to deal with, so Ed was not able to make that connection today. So what I'm faced with, or we're faced with a clock that's running out is a known issue that you talked to Attorney Kaplan about, that's unacceptable to us and that we will not budge on, and we haven't seen any budging on the other side. And now a new concern, which is the reservation of rights clause in contracts with other people. So, what do you do? I have some feeling Tom's going to share them. I'm not hopeful that we'll deliver a Pinkerton tuition agreement without compromising things that we're not willing to compromise. And I did call the headmaster today. And you know, I told her I thought some of this was a deal breaker. One of the options that she and I talked about, and then I called Ed Kaplan, and I spoke to Ed as late as 3:30. He's on the phone today. And there's a reason why I'm talking about this at the budget workshop, because some of this does have budgetary impact. I have a sense that Pinkerton would be willing that Pinkerton would be willing to enter into an MOU with us. And continue talking for the long term, but not while the clock is running out. So I think what the board has to sort of consider if you think you would approve the MOUs, and they're really no different than what Ed passed out when he last met with you. If the board thought that they would approve the MOUs with the language in number 4, reservation of rights there, then you may want to consider foregoing the tuition agreement and trying to get an MOU worked out, which should be I would think would be able to be done in a more timely fashion. I just see there being issues that are not going to be easily resolved. And there are some remaining issues that I couldn't, in good conscience, recommend to this board that we go on.
With that idea, Dr. Littlefield, that would take away the budget pressure, because I'm asking you if this is correct, because MOU would be the standard rate, correct? So even if we weren't able to secure that MOU for a month or so, it really wouldn't impact the budget, as long as we budgeted for our newly
I
acquired
did
number.
take the liberty of doing my tirade in Karen Lasai's office today. And I did ask Karen, I told Karen what I was going to report to the board, and asked her if she could bring in some different budget numbers, not change the budget because the board isn't taking any action. And, but to answer your question, I think with the board, the position the board took with the satellite schools is you would pay, parents would be responsible for paying the difference in tuition from the anchor school, which would be Pembroke, I'm sorry, it's been a long day, which would be Pinkerton, and that tuition is 10.8. Well, it's a rough estimate. Tomorrow night they'll set the tuition. So you would be paying, parents would be paying the difference between 10.8 and what the tuition is to the satellite school. You'd be on the hook for 10.8 for every youngster not attending, or every youngster attending a satellite school. If there's not a tuition agreement with Pinkerton, and there's an MOU instead, I would assume the board would revisit that, and that you would pay the Manchester rate, which would be 10.2. So there's a $600 differential there for as many students as Karen calculated in the budget. The other thing that you might want to think about is if we have an MOU with Pinkerton as opposed to a tuition agreement with Pinkerton, what would your ideas be in regard to transportation? Because the landscape would change. So I really deeply apologize. I'm really, really bummed out because I feel as though I've failed. But I don't think that we can keep prolonging this. The news came today, probably a good day for it to come, where we have both a budget workshop and a board meeting. I'm reporting this to you now because it does possibly have budgetary impact, and I probably should give a summary of what I'm talking to you about at our regular meeting as well, because not everybody would be watching a budget workshop.
I just had a question for Karen. What is the number we're using for that 100%? What's the student count?
For all of the students?
Yes.
We have 511 I'm using to, for high school, but I only did 226 at the 10.8 because I did the kids that will be 10th, 11th, and 12th grade next year at other high schools, and then I made the assumption that all of the 8th graders would go into one of those other schools, so I budgeted worst case scenario. So I budgeted 285 at 10,200 and 226 at 10,800. And that's only regular ed students.
So 511, that's all we have
For regular ed.
for
yes.
regular ed. Now, how many special ed do we have right now?
Well,
Roughly.
I'm sorry, how many was it? 8? Did you say 8 or 8?
8.
And do we have a rough number that we use to estimate special? I know they're all different, they all have different needs, but do we have an average cost for a special needs student?
And those costs aren't changing for the budget purpose. For this purpose, this is pretty much just affects the
Regular
regular
rate.
rate.
I just have a couple of questions, and it seems that we may have to shift gears as far as inter-school tuition and busing. When you say they may enter into an MOU, for how long? Would this be an ongoing, or are they looking for just until next, trying at this again next year? And if that's true, this MOU only lasts for those freshmen, or will this last for those freshmen to finish through till their 12th grade? Like, a lot of that's going to weigh on how I think that I will make my decision.
Well, all good questions. We haven't started negotiating an MOU. I was going to say 100% confident, but I probably shouldn't say that.
Well, that's where I'm kind of going with this. I'm a little bit nervous.
I'm confident that freshmen that are accepted, regardless of the length of the MOU at Pinkerton, freshmen that are accepted will be allowed to attend through graduation.
And that's stated in these ones we have.
Yeah.
If we terminate, and there's still somebody going through.
But I think Cheryl's talking about a possible Pinkerton MOU, and I certainly would recommend to the board that we need that assurance, even if the MOU, and I think my conversation with the headmaster was something along the lines of, okay, I've had it. We just can't be bringing up issue after issue. And maybe we need an MOU, and it would probably be a one-year MOU, and that would give the board, the board, the opportunity to take a year. I'd continue the negotiations with Pinkerton, but you'd be talking about a contract agreement for the 15-16 school year, not the 14-15 school. Gives you an opportunity to do a whole bunch of other things. Gives you time. Gives you the time.
So this smacks to me very similar of when at the beginning we were going with the single school, and then things changed, and then we ended up with hybrid, which again is fine. So two things concern me. Obviously the tuition number, I think everybody was thinking was going to be 10.3, 10.4, something like that. Now it being 10.8, and like obviously the non-starter is the fact that we talked about the other day at the 5 years, they were putting something in place that we didn't think was palatable, I guess I want to say. So obviously those things concern me big time.
I'm just trying to decide or be appropriate here with our discussion, because Dr. Littlefield mentioned the regular meeting, and I have some questions, and I guess we are kind of tangled into the budget here and also some other issues. So I guess if I get too far afield, please let me know. And I'm also wondering if it's appropriate to make a motion at this time, and so I guess I'm just going to go ahead and make a motion, and if we feel that it's inappropriate to do it at the budget committee, I'm certainly going to understand. I would make a motion that we continue the Pinkerton negotiation for a possible 15-16 school year start. If I get a second, I'll speak to it.
I'll second for discussion.
I think with all the information that Dr. Littlefield's laid out, I think this will allow us a year not, well, maybe not quite a year. I mean, it would be possible that this could still be brought to the March ballot, but the kids wouldn't be in limbo, we wouldn't be in limbo, and if there's looking like there's a possibility for an MOU that satisfies the students that want to go to Pinkerton, I think under the circumstances, it's the logical solution.
So, for me, the biggest surprise is this tuition jump. Because I think of the folks that are there.
Excuse myself from like that.
Okay. I think of the folks that are there, and a $600 jump is fairly significant to most families. And I didn't know if there's a way that we can offer any kind of protection in the negotiation of an MOU. In other words, you know, 10,292 I think is their current tuition, and you know, I think the talk around town and even things that people have seen in the paper and so forth, it seemed like a couple $100 jump. And so this is a surprise, and that's just the first thing that came to my mind. Can we protect? If Pinkerton is interested in a long-term relationship with Hooksett, I think that's somewhere where we could work with regards to negotiations, you know, and then foster that relationship for the families, and I think that's goodwill on their part, and that'll attract the families, and eventually, you know, we get into a long-term contract. Thank you.
Two good points that.
I'll recognize you, Dr. Littlefield.
Hi.
As Vice
I'm Phil
Chairman.
Littlefield, I'm the superintendent. Two things. One is, one of the stumbling blocks we're having with the tuition agreement is Pinkerton's unwillingness, and I don't mean that in an accusatory manner, I understand it, to provide us with something that they don't provide to the 4 districts that currently make up Pinkerton Academy. So, if there's any sense on the part of the board that we'll get a discounted tuition, I would say the probability of that is 0. The good news is, if there is any good news, the good news is the current tuition is $10,292, I believe. We paid $8,500. Parents paid $1,700 to go to Pinkerton. The new tuition is $10,800. If we pay $10,200 that we would have paid to Manchester, the parent's responsibility is $600. It's actually an $1,100 reduction for them. And I could say the same thing for any of the MOU schools. It should be.
I think also we were surprised that Manchester went up. So I think, you know, Pinkerton going up, maybe the enrollments may be a lot of factors, but I agree, the burden will be less, the sum burden will be less. I don't think that we're gonna, I mean, even in these agreements, we have no cap. Really, the only control we have right now that I see is with the Manchester 4-year agreement, because we have 4 years of guaranteed rates. Everything in here is subject to calculation every year. So I think that's what we're gonna have to deal with.
I just was gonna say that, I just think that that particular motion may be better served in the regular meeting. I'd be more than willing to motion and vote on things like if we're gonna change the buses, or if we're going to change, the anchor school tuition, because those are budgetary. I just think if we're gonna make a major change like that, there'll be more of the public paying attention during our regular meeting, and that's kind of a biggie, and that would be my reservation. If it was to come up, I would reconsider it at the regular meeting.
No, I was just gonna say, I think, based on my limited knowledge of Robert's rules, I guess we call them, We all abstained, us three, so it'll be up to Cheryl and Tricia, you guys, for the tuition, I believe. On the busing, we all voted on, so whatever, just tossing it out there. And that sounds like a good idea, because it'll be more public, et cetera, at the other meeting. Phil's got his hand up.
Another option that you would have is during the budget workshop to make budget adjustments. And Karen does have some analysis for you that shows some of this. You could make budget adjustments subject to approval in your regular meeting. Otherwise, we get in this catch-22.
Well, I normally would be the one to say, let's wait until the 7 o'clock meeting and everybody gets here. But if we're asked to remove the budget, the line for the bus, what's the reason? And the reason is we're going to vote this down. I mean, so it gets to me to be a more honest thing to either hold everything off or deal with it now. Because I'd like to be right up front to say, if we're going to remove that 4 buses, why are we doing that? So I think we either dive in or we wait. And I don't know how we can wait, because then we're just really, I guess we could go over little things, say, or, I mean, continue where we were. But for me, I think we need to kind of take this vote and decide whether we're continuing with Pinkerton. And if the vote of the board is no, then I think there's going to be some budget decisions that are going to fall into place. But to try to anticipate those ahead of time, I don't think it's a good idea.
So listening to Dr. Littlefield's suggestion, again, I'm a budgetary novice here. So his suggestion is you make these adjustments all pending the final vote at the board, if I understand you correctly. So I don't see what is wrong with that with a compromise. Is there some technical reason why that wouldn't work?
Another thing you could do is actually take the vote in the workshop session and ratify the vote in the open session. You'd want Leanne to keep a record of the votes that you took in budget workshop and just ratify those votes in open session. I mean, the point, and the reason I'm suggesting that is, I think the public is more apt to be watching our regular meeting, and we want to make sure that the public is aware of what's happening.
I have one question, Dr. Littlefeld. Is this working? You mentioned that you were going to give this same overview, or you thought you should give the same overview that you've given us in the public when we get to your part of updates from Dr. Littlefield. Would that be, if we do it either way, wait to vote till later or vote now and ratify them then? Is that the point in the meeting when we would let the public be aware of what actions we've taken based on what was presented to us?
That might be the time to make the public aware, but I also think you need to get in the habit, and I don't mean that in a critical way, of when you take an action, it's a recorded vote. So if we're going to make believe that you are going to reduce your transportation line item, I think someone should really make a motion to reduce that line item, and should be seconded and voted on at your budget workshop, so that the record shows what actions the board took at the budget workshop.
Okay. I guess. So, based on the developments today from Dr. Littlefield, I would make a motion that we...
We already have a motion on the floor.
I'm sorry.
Could you restate David's motion, please?
David, for a motion that we continue the Pinkerton negotiation for a possible 2015-2016 school year start.
I'd like to make an amendment to that motion. I'd like to amend that just to say, with the final vote to be ratified at the regular November 19th Hooksett School Board meeting.
Second.
Speak to the motion. I'm all for informing the public, but I see we have every right here. This is a budget issue. If we want to stop progress on this contract, we're really not canceling anything. We're just not pursuing something that we were going to bring forward. I mean, I don't see that we have a problem doing it here. I would rather that we have that clean vote and then we start looking at the budget based on a recorded vote of the board.
Not regarding your business.
Bill and John?
I'd like to withdraw my motion for the amendment.
I'll withdraw my second.
How about on the original motion? Sure.
I guess I mean, because this is, to me, a biggie. So I don't want to just feel like I haven't gotten enough information or I haven't digested it enough before I make this vote. Because my understanding from the past was that Pinkerton is kind of bound by some rules of its sending districts about how many kids it can take. So my question is, I know that you had a conversation with the headmaster, but realistically, is this going to work? Because I'm as frustrated as you are, because I feel like we've been down a very long path over the last 2 years. So help me out here. Is this really something that is likely to happen? I don't know any other more frank way or unfrank way or more polite way of putting it. But, I mean, just how much more can we drag the public down this winding road? I just feel like that we've done, and now I just feel like we've backpedaled so much.
Remember, this is a conversation that I was having, and not a negotiations session.
Right.
And I think I said something like, so you mean to tell me, will you take 75 of my kids? I believe the answer was yes.
I feel like we don't have much choice but to move in this direction.
I mean, you can
It's just really worries me of what will actually happen. But I really feel like our hands are tied the way we're discussing it right now, that we don't have anywhere else to go but to go ahead and do this and hope that the board of directors or whoever gets to make that final decision or the sending district will be okay with this. Because if they're not, where are we at then?
I think that last year that the sending districts, I think, agreed to let that number go to 75, which could possibly mean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm speaking with any authority, it could possibly mean that the board of directors might be willing to let that total number go to Hooksett in an MOU.
But it couldn't be more than 75 then.
I don't know that that's...
These are sort of rhetorical questions towards you, but I just think that they're, definitely things that we have to understand or realize that could happen. It could happen that they say, nope, only the 75, and we have more than 75 that want to go there. We could end up having them say, not at all, nothing.
Right,
and where are we then?
And in the negotiations of the MOU, it's like all negotiations. I don't like to negotiate against myself, meaning the limit they have on the number of kids from non-member districts that they can accept is their problem. So I suppose that in a perfect MOU, that they'd agree to accept all our kids. I mean, they didn't just say that they're gonna accept all our kids. but
I'd like to get back to the motion, because I think what's on the table here is we have to decide whether or not to pursue the current negotiation for implementation of the Pinkerton contract in 2014. I think we have to decide if that's practical to continue. And that's what we need to vote on. And in my opinion, Dr. Littlefield has laid out a scenario where that has become impossible. I think we can have that vote, and then we can explore possibilities, but I don't think one makes the other. If Pinkerton said to us right now, we can't give you an MOU, does it make the contract any more possible? I don't think so. I think the contract is where it is. So I think we need to kind of vote on that. Then I think we can make some of these other decisions, and frankly, I think the MOU decision and further discussion should happen at the 7 o'clock meeting, because we wouldn't know tonight that Pinkerton was going to take an MOU, and even if they did, it would be the same budgetary number. So I think that would be a good discussion to have in front of the public. We need to stick to the budgetary issues, and the motion on the table right now is about the contract.
But I guess where I'm at with this is, okay, so if we go this route, which in some ways I don't see any other possibilities, but if we go this route, we're saying basically that we're not going to continue any negotiations for the 14-15 school year. And if that's true, and if we can't get a MOU worked out, then our kids will probably end up back in Manchester or in those other slots that are in the other MOUs. Am I thinking of this correctly?
Just for clarification, what do you mean our kids will end up?
The choices will be Manchester or the other MOUs. If we can't get an MOU worked out during this interim, if we proceed with the 15-16 school year, and we're going to stop negotiations for 14-15, and we can't get the MOU in place for Pinkerton, the choices will be Manchester, and the slots that's 40, 50, let's just use another 10 for 60 kids to go elsewhere. That's what we'll be faced with for this 8th grade class.
No, I'm thinking, next year's 8th grade class.
This year's 8th grade class. If we're not pursuing a contract this year, it'll be on the March ballot,
Yeah.
and the MOU doesn't go as planned, our choices for the 8th grade class is going to be Manchester and 60, possibly 60 slots at the other 3 schools.
Well, let me make up the number, and boy, I hate to do this. We know that we have 10 slots, up to 10 slots, freshman slots involved. We know we have up to 40 at Londonderry, so there's 50.
Mm-hmm.
Just for argument's sake, supposing Pembroke comes back with 40, it's 90. And just for argument's sake, supposing Pinkerton comes back with 50, that's 140. So we have 140 slots, 170, Matt, 8th graders? Some of whom will go to Trinity and so forth, but suppose it brings it down to 150. The remaining youngsters may opt to attend the Manchester School District, but if we ended up with more kids than we had satellite slots for, I I would imagine that you'd assign those kids to Manchester. That would be the only option you have, because you have a tuition agreement in Manchester.
Versus, I'm not.
Point of order, Madam Chair, I've said it 3 times. The motion on the floor is whether we move the contract back. And in light of informing the public, I think these are great discussions about our future plans that we
David,
should
but I
have at
can't
7
make a
o'clock.
decision unless I
Excuse me, I have
understand what
the
I'm
floor.
making.
No, you actually don't, she does.
No, you recognize me
Oh, I
to
did
have
not,
the
I did
floor.
not say your name. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Madam Chair, I call the point of order because we're getting far away from the motion. It was discussed here that we wanted to be as forthright with the public as we can. Future plans should be discussed in front of the public. We need to decide whether or not to pursue this contract. And I don't see how that's connected to the likelihood of an MOU or not, unless Dr. Littlefield wants to explain that. He's laid out to us the situation we're in with the contract negotiations. We have to decide, is there any way to proceed or not? That's my motion, and that's what we should be discussing.
So if I vote no, Dr. Littlefield, if I vote no on this, then we would continue to try to pursue the contract with Pinkerton. And we would have to still attempt to negotiate. But you really feel that we're down to the wire, that that's not going to happen.
Well, I feel that we're down to a point in time where we can't take any more time. And that it doesn't appear that we'd be able to address the differences we have in a tuition agreement in a timely fashion. And therefore an MOU becomes more of an attractive alternative. And I'm not trying to beg the question, but I mean, we could continue to negotiate. I'm just not I'm not confident that I'd come back to you in a week and say, guess what? I just don't see it. And I do think with time on our side, that we would be more likely to be able to.
So David, you had your hand up with a question. Has your question been answered? I wrote down, it said David, John, and then myself.
I would comment, I think Dr. Littlefield has laid out the scenario. I think it's up to us to decide if it's time to pull the plug. I think what he mentioned about what's going to happen in 5 years in the contract, I think the board was pretty clear about that, and now he's mentioned the other provision about reserving rights. So unless we think that there is some way to save this negotiation for this year, I think we should take this vote and then adjust the budget accordingly. And then at 7 o'clock under high school issues, I think we start talking about what we want to do now, or at that time, where do we want to go? I just don't want to cut the public out of all of that discussion here. Thank you.
John, you had your hand up next.
Just the only thing I want to comment is, many times on this board, we keep talking about, Dr. Littlefield's leadership and so forth. And I mean, this is a key time. I mean, he's got some critical information. We have a budget in front of us that we have to attack here. And, I think it's one of those times we have to listen and go for it, go for what the suggestion is here. It just makes sense, but I agree with David that the whole discussion about MOU and everything else in a forward-looking direction, I think we should save that for the public, because the public's not expecting that in this budget discussion.
Ms. Wolf?
Yep, so,
And then I have some questions to ask.
okay. So I think we should get done what we have to get done to do the budget. And I don't think what I think Cheryl was trying to get right in her mind the MOU versus the tuition agreement and continuing on. So I'm fine with taking a vote. I think, again, based on what Dr. Littlefield said and doubling down on what David said, there was that 5-year issue was a non-starter. We said that. And the tuition number is also kind of discouraging, I would say. So anyway.
So Karen, I have some questions for you related to a budget, related to the budget process. It said in our draft presentation, and this might not be the most updated one I just scanned through, we're presenting the budget committee with their books next Tuesday or Wednesday, is that correct?
Hopefully, if you've made all your decisions.
All right, my question for, I realize the timing on this is very short. What we've heard today is not what we would have liked to have heard. The Board of Trustees of Pinkerton meets on Thursday. Is it, based on that this is an unlikely situation, if we were to continue to use the 10 projected number from Pinkerton of 10.8, and then after their meeting on Thursday, it is proven that this is not going to go according to what we have planned for months now. If the budget committee already had the book and it was at 10.8, and we then notified them Pinkerton is an MOU, we don't have an MOU with Pinkerton, and I feel very strongly that we have gone down a very long path saying that we felt Manchester was in breach. We got a mediated settlement with Manchester, and now we're going to say to a larger number of kids than we thought, you're going to Manchester because your criteria doesn't meet the guidelines that we're working on setting up.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
I
We're
am-
still us speaking to the motion.
Yes, I am. I'm talking about budget and money, and is it time to say that we can't make a deal, or is it not? And I'm asking if that is something that can happen. I need to take a recess. Be back in 5 minutes. Karen, I'm going to go back to my original question to you. Is that something that has ever happened before, that a school board gives a number to a budget committee and then adjusts the number because something changed in their dynamic of their situation?
Yes.
Okay. So we could conceivably continue to negotiate to see if, rather than decide today, and if in a week we realize it's not going to work, we could change the number to and notify the budget committee that the high school tuition line item changes and this is why.
And that would work both ways, actually. If you decided tonight to reduce it, but then negotiations went well and you wanted to increase it, you could do that. So it would, you know, you could either increase your budget beforehand or decrease it.
Okay, I wasn't sure, and I just wanted to clarify that for myself. Yes, Mr. Paul.
This board voted to have Dr. Littlefield negotiate the Pinkerton contract. That was the will of the board. He has now reported back to us. I know it may be news that we don't want to hear, but I think we need to look at it objectively, and we need to ask any other questions if we don't understand what he has said. But I think it's futile, after what he has said, to send him back to continue to try to negotiate this under the deadlines that we've set forth, if he is telling us that he doesn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. So I think when this board voted to not create a committee, this is now Dr. Littlefield is reporting back to us, and I think we need to think long and hard about what he's just told us.
I'd like to move the question.
All those in favor of moving the question, please signify by saying aye.
Good eye.
Aye.
Aye.
Carries 5-0.
Can we have the motion read again, just to make sure what we're voting on?
Motion that we continue the Pinkerton negotiation for a possible 2016 school year start.
All those in favor signify by saying.
Ma'am, could I request a roll call vote, please?
Absolutely.
David Pearl,
Yes.
John Listars,
Yes.
Cheryl Axton,
Yes.
Phil Dembo,
Yes.
Trish Corpus.
No.